The icy confidence in Vanessa's voice made my stomach tighten as she marched into my conference room, designer briefcase in one hand, our father's arm locked in the other. "Guess what, Olivia? The family meeting is happening now instead of Friday. Mom and Dad have decided I'm taking over as CEO. After all, I have an MBA and a family legacy to continue." She dropped a manila envelope onto the glass table, scattering the investor presentation I'd spent all night perfecting. I glanced up from my laptop, keeping my face carefully neutral. 8 years of transforming a failing local hardware store into a $10 million construction supply empire had taught me to never show weakness in the face of a threat. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. "You might want to check the company bylaws before making announcements," I said quietly, reaching for the secure drawer beneath my custom-built reclaimed wood desk. A desk I'd designed myself from materials our company had salvaged from a historic downtown renovation project. Vanessa rolled her eyes, her diamond earrings catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the headquarters I'd designed and built from the ground up. "Bylaws? Don't be dramatic. Mom and Dad started Hamilton Building Supply 30 years ago. They can hand it to whoever they want." She glanced at our father, who hadn't met my eyes since entering the room. His shoulders were stooped, his once commanding presence diminished. Mom stood behind him, lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval I'd grown accustomed to seeing directed my way. "My name is Olivia Hamilton, and at 34, I'm the acting CEO of Hamilton Building Supply, though apparently my parents have forgotten who saved their legacy when bankruptcy loomed." I pulled out a black leather portfolio that had traveled with me to hundreds of client meetings, bank appointments, and late-night planning sessions. "Actually, I think you'll find this interesting reading." The company had been my life for nearly a decade, ever since I'd abandoned my promising architecture career in Boston to save the family business. I watched Vanessa's perfectly manicured nails flip through the documents, her expression shifting from smug certainty to confusion, then disbelief as she reached the operating agreement I'd had drawn up when I invested my entire life savings into the failing business. This says you own 60% of the company," she stammered, looking up at our parents. "It says you're the majority shareholder. That can't be right." She turned to our father, whose gaze remained fixed on the industrial carpet. "Dad? The bank was going to take everything," he said quietly, the first words he'd spoken since entering my office. "We were 3 months behind on loans. Suppliers wouldn't extend more credit. Your mother and I were going to lose the house, the business, everything. So you just gave it to her?" Vanessa's voice rose an octave, her carefully controlled image cracking at the edges. "What about me? What about my children? We're family, too." "Family?" I couldn't hold back a short, sharp laugh as I stood, smoothing the wrinkles from my tailored suit. "Where was your sense of family when Mom and Dad called begging for help? When I showed you the bankruptcy paperwork? You said, and I quote, 'That's totally a bummer, but Aspen's calling.' Gregory's parents booked the chalet for the whole month." I walked to the window, gazing out at the 5-acre lot filled with building materials, delivery trucks emblazoned with the Hamilton logo, and the sleek showroom where contractors and homeowners browsed high-end fixtures and sustainable building options, all innovations I'd implemented against my parents' objections. While you were skiing, I was negotiating with creditors. While you were posting vacation photos, I was rebuilding supplier relationships that Dad had destroyed with his stubborn refusal to modernize. When I'd returned home from Boston 8 years ago, Hamilton Building Supply had been on life support. My parents had clung to an outdated business model, focusing on retail hardware when big box stores had made that approach obsolete. Their customer base had dwindled to a handful of loyal old-timers, and their inventory was gathering dust. The company had been hemorrhaging money for years, but Dad refused to change course. I still remember the night I received my mother's tearful, call. I'd just been promoted at one of Boston's most prestigious architectural firms. My career trajectory pointed firmly upward. I'd flown home that weekend expecting to celebrate my parents' anniversary. Instead, I found them sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by past due notices and foreclosure threats. "We're going to lose everything," Dad had admitted, his proud face crumpled in defeat. "The business, the house. I don't know what to do anymore." My mother, always his most loyal supporter, had reached for his hand, her wedding ring catching. The light, the same ring that had been pawned and repurchased 3 times in the early days of their marriage as they struggled to build the business. I didn't hesitate. The next morning, I called my boss and resigned. I emptied my savings account, cashed in my 401k, and even sold the waterfront condo I'd purchased just 6 months earlier. The numbers barely added up, but I was determined to save my parents' legacy. Vanessa, meanwhile, hadn't even bothered to come home when I told her how bad things were. "You're being melodramatic," she'd said during our brief phone call. "Dad's always talking about how business is tough. They'll figure it out. Besides, Gregory and I are looking at wedding venues in Santorini next month." And figure it out I did. I worked 20-hour days, sleeping on a cot in the office storage room to save on rent. I overhauled the entire business model, shifting focus from retail to contractor supplies, specializing in eco-friendly and reclaimed materials that larger competitors couldn't source. I built an online presence, implemented inventory management systems, and personally visited every major construction company within a 100-mile radius. Each small victory had been a battle with my father, who resisted every change with the same stubbornness that had nearly bankrupted the company. "We've always done it this way," became his mantra, until the day I landed our first $500,000 contract with a major commercial developer. Even then, he'd taken credit at the Chamber of Commerce dinner, accepting congratulations while I worked late finalizing the logistics. Now, standing in my conference room facing my sister's entitled indignation, I felt a strange sense of déjà vu. This wasn't the first time my contributions had been minimized, my sacrifices taken for granted, but it was the first time they'd attempted to push me out entirely. "The operating agreement is legally binding," I said, turning back to face my family. "I own 60% of Hamilton Building Supply. Dad and Mom retain 30% as silent partners, and 10% is held in a trust for employee profit sharing. Another innovation they fought against, but that has reduced our turnover rate to nearly 0 in an industry where constant churn is the norm." "But that's not fair." Vanessa slammed her hand on the table, her voice rising. "I'm their daughter too. I deserve—" "Deserve?" The word hung in the air between us. "What exactly do you think you deserve, Vanessa? A multi-million-dollar company you've contributed nothing to? A business you've visited exactly twice in the past 8 years? Tell me, what part of that entitles you to anything?" My office door opened, and Jamie, our operations manager, appeared with a tablet in hand. "Sorry to interrupt, Ms. Hamilton, but the sustainability auditors are here for the quarterly review, and the team from Westridge Development is waiting in the model home to finalize the eco-housing contract." "Thank you, Jamie. Tell them I'll be right there." I gathered my laptop and the scattered presentation materials. "If you'll excuse me, I have a business to run." "This isn't over," Vanessa hissed, her composure completely shattered. "Dad, tell her. Tell her this isn't what you wanted." My father finally raised his eyes to meet mine, and I saw something I'd never expected. Fear. Not of me, but of the truth I might reveal. "Olivia, please. Your sister has 3 children to think about. Gregory's real estate ventures haven't been as successful as they appear. They need this." And there it was. The real reason for this sudden family meeting. Gregory's Instagram posts about luxury property developments and exclusive listings had always seemed suspiciously polished compared to the actual results I'd occasionally glimpsed when reviewing Vanessa's tax returns. Another task that had fallen to me as the responsible one. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. So this isn't about who deserves to run the company, I said slowly, understanding dawning. It's about bailing out Vanessa and Gregory again, just like the down payment on their house, just like the loan for their twins' private preschool, just like the investor money for Gregory's failed condo development. My mother stepped forward, her face tightening with disapproval. Family helps family, Olivia. You've always been so calculating, so cold. Your sister needs security for her children. And I need the business I built to remain solvent, I replied, my voice level despite the hurt her words inflicted. The same business that pays for your winter home in Arizona. The same business that funded Dad's boat. The same business that employs 37 people who depend on smart leadership, not nepotism and handouts. I headed for the door, then paused, turning back to face them. By the way, we're in the middle of our annual financial audit. The accountants have some interesting questions about certain personal expenses that have been charged to the company. Expenses I didn't authorize. I looked pointedly at my father, whose face had gone pale. Perhaps we should discuss those before making decisions about succession planning. The color drained from my father's face. What do you mean? Interesting. Questions? I mean the $47,000 in consulting fees paid to Gregory's LLC last year for services never rendered. I mean the 3 family vacations charged as research trips. I mean the luxury SUV purchased with company funds that somehow ended up in Vanessa's driveway. With each example, I watched my mother's righteous indignation fade into something more akin to panic. The auditors have flagged numerous financial irregularities, all of which occurred when you were using the company credit cards I provided for legitimate business purposes only. Vanessa whirled to face our parents. You said those were gifts. You said Olivia had approved them. I think we should continue this discussion after the audit is complete, I said calmly. The full report will be ready on Friday. Until then, nothing changes with the company leadership or ownership structure. I nodded to Jamie, who held the door for me. And Vanessa, the next time you want to stage a coup, make sure you understand what you're trying to take first. As I walked down the hallway toward the conference room where the sustainability auditors waited, I heard my mother's urgent whispers and my father's muffled responses. Jamie fell into step beside me, her expression concerned. Should I call security? Things seem pretty heated in there. I shook my head. No, they'll leave once they've figured out their next move. Right now, they need time to get their stories straight about the unauthorized expenses. I straightened my jacket and took a deep breath, pushing the family drama aside as I prepared to focus on the business I'd built. Tell me about these auditors. Are they the same team as last quarter? The transformation of Hamilton Building Supply had been nothing short of extraordinary, though few people understood the true extent of what I'd accomplished. When I returned home 8 years ago, the company was operating out of a dilapidated building with peeling paint and a leaking roof. Inventory was managed on paper ledgers, and the most advanced technology was a cash register from the early 1990s. Today, we operated from a state-of-the-art headquarters that showcased sustainable building materials and energy-efficient design, a living portfolio of our capabilities. We'd expanded from a single location to 3 strategic distribution centers serving developers across the state. Our revenue had grown from barely $800,000 annually to over $10 million, with profit margins that were the envy of the industry. I'd diversified our offerings to include consultation services, installation, and even a small but growing architectural division that specialized in affordable eco-housing. None of it had come easily. Every advancement had been a battle. Every innovation met with resistance from my parents, who couldn't understand why we needed to evolve beyond the business model they'd established decades ago. I'd fought for every change, proving its value with spreadsheets and projections until even my father couldn't argue with the results. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, site visits, and supplier negotiations. I'd just finished approving the final designs for our new eco-friendly shipping containers when my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "We need to talk, privately, without your sister. Dinner at the house tonight." I sighed, looking at the stack of contracts still awaiting my review. It was already past 7, and I had at least 3 more hours of work ahead of me. "Can it wait until after the audit?" I texted back. His response was immediate. "No, this can't wait. Please, Olivia." The use of please caught my attention. My father rarely asked for anything. He simply expected compliance. Whatever this was about, it wasn't a continuation of this morning's ambush. "On my way," I replied, gathering my things. As I drove the familiar route to my childhood home, I couldn't help but reflect on how everything and nothing had changed. The house looked the same, a comfortable colonial with the Hamilton building, supply sign still hanging beside the front door, a relic from when my grandfather had run the business from the garage. The porch swing where I'd spent summers reading blueprints still creaked in the evening breeze. The maple tree I'd fallen from at age 9 still stood sentinel in the front yard. But everything else had transformed. The business that had once been the pride of my parents' lives now existed in a form they barely recognized, shaped by my vision instead of theirs. The daughter they'd always seen as the serious, responsible one had become a stranger to them, a powerful businesswoman whose success somehow threatened rather than pleased them. My father was waiting in his study, the same room where he'd once tracked inventory and balanced books by hand. The leather chair behind his desk, now rarely used since he'd gradually stepped back from daily operations, seemed to swallow his diminished frame. For the first time, I noticed how old he looked, how the robust man who'd once carried lumber single-handedly now seemed fragile. "Sit down, Olivia," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. "We need to talk about what happens next." I remained standing, keeping my distance. Years of family dynamics had taught me to be wary of these private conversations, which often became emotional manipulations. "I'm listening." He sighed heavily, reaching for a folder on his desk, a mirror of my earlier gesture with the operating agreement. "Before we get to the audit, there's something you should see." I stepped forward and took the folder, opening. It defined documents I'd never seen before. Documents that would shatter everything I thought I knew about Hamilton Building Supply and my place within it. As I read the first page, my carefully constructed professional mask slipped for the first time that day. "What is this?" I whispered, the implications hitting me with physical force. "Dad, what have you done?" My hands trembled as I flipped through the documents my father had just handed me. The first page was a loan agreement from Meridian Capital Partners dated 15 years ago, long before I'd stepped in to save the business. The collateral listed wasn't just the company assets, it included 70% ownership stake in Hamilton Building Supply. I sank into the chair across from my father, the reality of what I was reading sinking in like a physical weight. "You never owned the company outright," I said, my voice barely audible. "Not even when I came back to save it." My father's eyes remained fixed on the antique desk calendar, the same one my mother gave him when they opened their first store 3 decades ago. "No, we didn't." His admission hung in the stale air of his study, the room suddenly feeling smaller than it had moments before. "So when I invested my life savings, when I signed that operating agreement giving me 60% ownership, you were buying shares the bank already owned," he finished for me, finally meeting my gaze. "I never told you because I was ashamed. Your mother and I had already remortgaged the house twice. We'd already borrowed against our retirement. Meridian was our last resort." The implications crashed over me in waves. If the bank owned 70% when I'd stepped in, then the operating agreement I'd proudly displayed this morning, the document I'd believed protected my position, was potentially worthless. "Does Vanessa know about this?" "No one knows. Not your sister, Not your mother, just me and the bank. He pulled another document from the folder. But that's not all. When you came back and started turning things around, when you secured that first big commercial contract, Meridian took notice. They sent a representative to discuss their expectations. I recognized the logo on the letterhead immediately. Meridian Capital Partners was no ordinary bank. They were notorious for acquiring distressed businesses, extracting maximum value, then selling off the assets. Their chairman, Victor Keller, had been named Corporate Raider of the Year by Business. Weekly 3 years running, they wanted to control our expansion, my father continued, his voice steadier now that the initial confession was behind him. They pushed us to take on more debt for rapid growth, knowing we couldn't sustain it. The plan was to force us into default once we'd built enough value, then take over completely and sell to a national chain. My mind raced, reconstructing the timeline. That's why you fought me on every modernization effort, every expansion proposal, not because you were stubborn, but because I was trying to protect you, he said quietly. I knew if we grew too big, too fast, they'd swoop in. I thought if we stayed small, stayed under the radar, they might forget about us. But then you kept succeeding, despite my efforts to hold you back. The company value tripled, then quadrupled. We couldn't stay invisible anymore. I leafed through more documents, amendments to the original loan, communications between my father and Meridian's representatives, proposals for strategic partnerships that were thinly veiled hostile takeover attempts. Why are you showing me this now? Why today of all days? My father slid a final document across the desk, this one dated just 3 weeks ago. Because Meridian has called in the loan, they've given us 30 days to repay in full or surrender control of the company. Your mother and I don't have that kind of money. Neither does Vanessa, despite what she and Gregory pretend. His voice cracked slightly. That's why I agreed to her plan. She convinced Gregory's father to help buy out Meridian's stake, but only if she was installed as CEO. It was the only option I could see to keep Hamilton in the family. The pieces suddenly aligned with sickening clarity. Today's ambush hadn't been just about Vanessa's entitlement. It had been a desperate, misguided attempt to save the company from outside control. So when the auditors started asking questions about unauthorized expenses, I panicked, my father admitted. Those expenses, they weren't all personal indulgences. Some were payments to a lawyer who's been trying to find loopholes in the Meridian agreement. Some were for a private investigator, looking into Keller's business practices. We were trying to find leverage, anything to buy us more time. I stood and paced the length of the study, 8 years of memories reframing themselves in my mind. You should have told me. From the beginning, you should have trusted me with the truth. Would you have come back if you'd known? Would you have invested everything you had in a company that was already partially owned by vulture capitalists? Would you have worked yourself to exhaustion rebuilding something that could be taken away at any moment? His questions hit their mark. Would I have made the same sacrifices knowing the precarious position the company was really in? I wasn't sure, but I was certain of one thing. I deserved to have made that choice with full information. How much? I asked, turning to face him. How much does Meridian need to release their claim? $4 million, due in 27 days. The number hung between us, impossibly large. I laughed, a short, hollow sound without humor. 4 million, and you thought Gregory's father was the solution? The man who's been quietly bailing out his son's failed ventures for years? It was the only lifeline we could find. Vanessa said, Vanessa doesn't know the first thing about business finance or corporate strategy. I cut him off. And neither do you, apparently, if you thought this was a viable plan. The hurt in his eyes at my words was visible, but I pressed on. Have you even read Gregory's father's proposal? What does he want in exchange for this investment? My father's silence was answer enough. I reached for the folder again, searching for documentation of this supposed savior deal. Finding nothing, I pulled out my phone and dialed a number. Jamie, I need you to pull all the files on the Westridge development contract. Yes, right now. And I need you to contact Lydia Chen at First Republic Bank. Tell her it's the emergency we discussed last year. I'll be at the office in 20 minutes. I ended the call and gathered the documents my father had shown me, tucking them into my bag. I'm taking these. And tomorrow, you're going to tell Vanessa and Mom everything you just told me. No more secrets, no more backroom deals. What are you going to do? My father looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, the weight of his deception finally visible in the slump of his shoulders. I'm going to do what I've been doing for the past 8 years, I replied, heading for the door. I'm going to save this business. Again. But this time, I'm doing it my way, with full transparency. As I drove back to the office, my mind cycled through options, discarding one after another as unworkable. $4 million in 27 days. It was a nearly impossible timeline, and that was surely by design. Meridian had waited until we were at our most valuable, then created conditions they believed we couldn't meet. The office was quiet when I arrived, most employees having gone home hours ago. Jamie waited in the conference room, the Westridge files spread across the table. I reached Lydia, she said as I entered. She can meet us tomorrow at 7 a.m. Good, we'll need her. I set down my bag and began scanning through the contract details. For our largest current project, a 200-unit eco-friendly housing development that would generate nearly $3 million in revenue over the next 18 months. It was the crown jewel of our recent achievements, a project I'd pursued relentlessly against multiple competitors with deeper pockets, but less innovative approaches. There's something you should know, Jamie said hesitantly. While you were gone, your sister came back. She was looking for financial records, specifically, information about our banking relationships and recent valuations. When I wouldn't give them to her, she claimed she had authority as a family member to access any company documents. My head snapped up. Please tell me you didn't. Of course not. Jamie looked offended at the suggestion. I've worked here for 6 years. I know who signs my paychecks. She pushed a security alert notification across the table. But she did try to use your father's old credentials to access the system remotely after she left. The security protocols you implemented last year flagged the attempt immediately. Another piece clicked into place. Vanessa's ambush this morning, her confident assertion that she would be taking over, she must have been laying groundwork for days, possibly weeks. Did she access anything before the system locked her out? Jamie shook her head. No, but she's been calling vendors asking about outstanding balances and payment terms. 3 suppliers contacted me this afternoon, concerned about her questions. I pinched the bridge of my nose, feeling a headache building. She's trying to piece together our financial position to present to Gregory's father, probably promising him we're in better shape than we actually are. I glanced at the security alert again. Change all the passwords, restrict remote access to you and me only, and first thing tomorrow, call our top 10 vendors and reassure them that the company leadership remains unchanged. Already done, Jamie. Confirmed. Now, what's this emergency with Lydia? And why are we reviewing the Westridge contract at 9 p.m.? I hesitated, weighing how much to share. Jamie had proven her loyalty countless times, but the fewer people who knew about our vulnerability, the better. We have an unexpected financial challenge. I need to raise a significant amount of capital quickly, and Westridge might be our best leverage. Jamie was too smart to accept such a vague explanation. How significant are we talking? And does this have anything to do with those auditors asking about unusual transactions? $4 million in less than 4 weeks. I watched her eyes widen. And yes, it's all connected, but not in the way you might think. The audit isn't just routine. I initiated it specifically to track certain discrepancies I'd noticed in our financial reports. You suspected someone was misappropriating funds, Jamie concluded. Your father? My father, my mother, and quite possibly my sister and her husband, I confirmed. But that's actually the smaller problem. The larger issue is what they were trying to hide with those transactions. I briefly outlined the situation with Meridian Capital, watching Jamie's expression shift from shock to calculation. So if we don't come up with $4 million in 27 days, we lose everything. And your family tried to solve this by installing your inexperienced sister as CEO with backing from her father-in-law. Jamie shook her head in disbelief. That's insane? Short-sighted? A complete betrayal of everything I've built? I supplied. Yes, all of the above, but I can't focus on that right now. I need solutions, not recriminations. We worked through the night, examining every contract, every potential source of capital, every asset that could be leveraged or liquidated. By dawn, we had the outline of a plan, a desperate, multifaceted approach that required precise timing and multiple contingencies. Lydia Chen arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, impeccably dressed despite the early hour. As First Republic's VP of Commercial Lending, she'd been instrumental in helping me establish Hamilton's line of credit 3 years ago, when traditional banks had balked at our rapid growth trajectory. $4 million in less than 4 weeks, she summarized after I'd explained our situation. Under normal circumstances, that would be challenging but doable with your company's financials. But with this Meridian situation, she frowned, reviewing the loan documents my father had provided. This complicates things significantly. Technically, they already have a senior position on all company assets. Which is why we need to get creative, I said, sliding the Westridge contract across the table. We're set to break ground next month on a 200-unit development with a total contract value of just under $3 million. The client has already approved our designs and material selection. Lydia studied the contract. You want to factor the receivables? That might get you $2 million at most, and the fees would be substantial given the accelerated timeline. Not factoring. I want to negotiate an advance payment in exchange for a 12% discount on the total contract price. Westridge has the cash. They just raised $50 million in their latest funding round. What they need is certainty that their flagship development will proceed on schedule with quality materials. That's still only $2.6 million after the discount, Lydia pointed out. Where's the rest coming from? Jamie placed another folder on the table. We've identified $800,000 in non-essential assets that can be liquidated quickly. The vacation. Property in Lake Tahoe that's used twice a year for corporate retreats, 3 company vehicles that aren't part of our core fleet, and excess inventory in our West warehouse that's been sitting for over 12 months. And the remaining $600,000? Lydia asked. I took a deep breath. That's where I was hoping First Republic might help. A short-term bridge loan secured by my personal assets, not the company's. Lydia's eyebrows rose. What personal assets? My house. It's worth $1.2 million, and I own it free and clear. I've also got about $300,000 in securities that could be liquidated. These represented virtually everything I owned outside the business, the rewards I'd finally allowed myself after years of pouring every penny back into Hamilton's growth. You'd risk your personal financial security for this? Lydia asked quietly. This company isn't just a business to me, I replied. It's my life's work. I've already invested 8 years and every resource I had. I'm not going to lose it now because my father made a desperate deal before I was even involved. Lydia was silent for a long moment, tapping her pen against the table. I'll need to present this to the committee. The personal guarantee helps, but the compressed timeline is problematic. And there's still the matter of Meridian's existing claim. I've thought of that too, I said, pulling out the final component of our plan, a detailed analysis of Meridian Capital's recent lending practices, including 3 cases with striking similarities to our own. They've done this before. They provide rescue financing to distressed businesses, hide clauses in the agreement that make default virtually inevitable, then swoop in to acquire companies at pennies on the dollar. In at least 2 cases, there have been allegations of predatory lending practices. You're suggesting leveraging potential legal action to negotiate with them, Lydia said, understanding immediately. I'm suggesting that a public legal battle might attract attention they don't want, especially given their recent attempts to acquire a banking license. Their chairman is currently being vetted by the Federal Reserve Board. Scrutiny of their small business lending practices could complicate that process. Lydia collected the documents, her expression thoughtful. I'll present everything to the committee this morning. You'll have an answer by close of business. She stood to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Olivia, most people would have walked away when they discovered what your father had done. The fact that you're still fighting says a lot about your character. After she left, Jamie and I moved on to the next phase, contacting Westridge Development to arrange an urgent meeting regarding their project. By 10 a.m., we had secured a lunch meeting with their CFO and project director. By noon, I was outlining our proposal, an accelerated construction schedule and materials discount in exchange for 85% advance payment. What prompted this sudden need for cash flow? Westridge's CFO asked bluntly. Your company's financials looked solid when we vetted you 3 months ago. I'd anticipated this question and prepared a response that was truthful without revealing our vulnerability. We have an opportunity to acquire a competitor's assets at a significant discount, but the window is closing rapidly. The acquisition would allow us to expand our sustainable materials division and potentially reduce costs on your project by an additional 3 to 5%. The negotiations continued through lunch and into the afternoon, with each side seeking assurances and contingencies. By 4 p.m., we had a tentative agreement. Westridge would provide a 75% advance payment in exchange for a 10% overall discount, with structured penalties if we missed construction milestones. When I finally returned to the office, I found my mother waiting in the reception area, her normally perfect appearance showing signs of strain. Your father told me everything, she said without preamble. About Meridian, about the loan coming due. Why didn't you answer my calls? I've been in meetings all day trying to save the business, I replied, continuing toward my office with her following behind. And frankly, I wasn't ready to talk to you after learning how long you've all been lying to me. We didn't lie, she protested as I closed my office door behind us. We just didn't tell you everything. That's the definition of lying by omission. Mom, for 8 years I've been operating under false assumptions about this company. Assumptions you and Dad allowed me to believe while I poured my life into saving something that was never fully ours. My mother sank into a chair, suddenly looking every one of her 64 years. We were trying to protect you, and we were ashamed. What kind of parents would we be if we admitted we'd gambled away our children's inheritance on a bad loan? That's honest kind, I shot back. The kind who respect their daughter enough to tell her the truth even when it's difficult. I sat down across from her, keeping the desk between us as a barrier. Where's Dad now? At home. He wanted to come, but... She trailed off, and I could fill in the blank. His pride, always his defining characteristic, couldn't face me after last night's revelations. And Vanessa? My mother's expression hardened slightly. She and Gregory are meeting with his father about helping with the Meridian situation. She's still convinced she can salvage their plan. I almost laughed at the absurdity. Their plan was fundamentally flawed from the start, even before I knew about Meridian. Gregory's father doesn't have $4 million to invest. Not liquid. Anyway, his real estate empire is mostly leveraged properties and incomplete developments. How would you know that? Because unlike everyone else in this family, I do my due diligence. I had Gregory's business ventures investigated 2 years. Ago when he came to me asking for investment in that ridiculous luxury condo project. What I found was a house of cards. Properties remortgaged multiple times. Investors paid with funds from new investors. classic Ponzi scheme territory. My mother's face paled. That can't be right. They live so well. The house in Brentwood, the cars, the vacations, all funded by debt and your daughter's willing blindness, I confirmed. Vanessa sees what she wants to see, just like you and Dad have been doing with this business for years. Before she could respond, my phone rang, Lydia Chen's name flashing on the screen. I answered immediately, putting it on speaker so I could take notes. The committee has approved a bridge loan of $500,000 secured by your personal real estate, Lydia announced without preamble. It's not the full amount you requested, but it's what they're comfortable with given the circumstances. The terms are as we discussed, 90-day maturity with the option to convert to a 5-year note if needed. Interest at prime +2. Relief washed over me. That's enough to make our plan work. Thank you, Lydia. Don't thank me yet, she cautioned. There's a condition. The committee wants assurance that this situation with Meridian won't recur. They're requiring that you establish a formal board of directors with at least 2 independent members, and that all shareholders, including your parents, sign new governance agreements with appropriate disclosure requirements. I glanced at my mother, whose expression had shifted from shock to indignation. That won't be a problem, I assured. Lydia, I've been wanting to formalize our corporate governance for years. After ending the call, I turned to face my mother, bracing for her objection. It came swiftly. A board of directors? Outside people telling us how to run our family business? Your father will never agree to that. He doesn't have a choice. None of us do, if we want to save Hamilton Building Supply. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. This is the consequence of choices made long before today. And it's actually the best possible outcome. We maintain family ownership but with proper oversight to prevent future secret deals like the one that got us into this mess. My mother was silent for a long moment, digesting this new reality. And what about Vanessa? Where does she fit into your plan? It was the question I'd been asking myself all day, through every negotiation and calculation. What place could my sister have in the company's future, given her actions and motivations? My answer would shape not just Hamilton Building Supply, but our family dynamics for years to come. That, I said carefully, depends entirely on what she does in the next 24 hours. Because tomorrow morning, we're all meeting with Meridian Capital Partners to present our response to their demand. And by then, everyone in this family will need to decide whose side they're really on. The Meridian Capital Partners office occupied the top floor of a gleaming downtown high-rise, all glass, steel, and calculated intimidation. I'd arrived 30 minutes early to center myself before the most important negotiation of my career. From the 47th floor conference room, the city spread below like a miniature model, including the industrial district where Hamilton Building Supply had started in a humble warehouse 3 decades ago. Impressive view, Jamie commented, arranging our presentation materials at one end of the massive conference table. Makes you feel small by design. That's the point, I agreed, straightening my charcoal suit jacket. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, professional, but not flashy, confident without appearing desperate. Everything about this space is engineered to establish dominance before anyone speaks a word. The door opened, and my father entered, followed closely by my mother. He'd aged overnight, the strain of our situation etched deeply around his eyes. Mother, however, had reverted to her default setting of dignified propriety, her expression carefully neutral. Olivia. Dad nodded, his voice subdued. You're sure about this approach? There's still time to consider Gregory's father's offer. We've been through this, I replied quietly. Harold Bennett doesn't have the liquid capital he claims. His investment would be another leveraged loan that would leave us in worse shape than we are now. I gestured to the chairs I'd arranged, on my side of the table. Where's Vanessa? She's coming separately with Gregory, my mother explained, primly taking a seat. They wanted to review some figures before the meeting. I exchanged a glance with Jamie, who subtly shook her head. We both knew what that meant. Vanessa was likely still pursuing her own agenda, despite everything that had been revealed. The next to arrive was our attorney, Eleanor Wright, a razor-sharp litigator who specialized in predatory lending cases. She'd been up all night reviewing the Meridian loan documents and preparing our counter-strategy. I've identified 3 potential violations of lending regulations, she announced without preamble, sliding a folder across to me. Plus, the contract contains unconscionable terms that could be challenged under state law. It's not a slam dunk, but it gives us leverage. Before I could respond, the door swung open again. Vanessa entered with Gregory in tow, both dressed in expensive, if slightly flashy, business attire. My sister's eyes darted around the room, landing briefly on the presentation materials before fixing on me with barely concealed hostility. I see you've started without us, she said coolly, choosing seats directly across the table rather than joining the family side. We're just preparing, I replied evenly. The meeting hasn't started yet. Gregory leaned forward, his artificial tan looking particularly garish under the conference room's lighting. My father's prepared to make a very generous offer. He's bringing his attorney to formalize things. Your father isn't invited to this meeting, I stated firmly. This is between Hamilton Building Supply and Meridian Capital. I turned to Vanessa. And since you have no official position with the company, you're here as an observer only. Her face flushed with anger. I'm every bit as much a Hamilton as you are. This is a family business. A family business that's 70% owned by the people we're about to negotiate with, I reminded her, keeping my voice level. A fact you would know if you'd bothered to attend the family meeting last night instead of pursuing your own agenda. Before she could retort, the main doors opened, and 3 people entered. 2 men and a woman, all wearing expressions of practiced neutrality. I recognized the leader immediately from business magazine covers. Victor Keller, chairman of Meridian. Capital Partners. At 62, he projected an image of distinguished authority, from his perfectly tailored suit to his silver hair. Flanking him were individuals I assumed to be legal counsel and financial officers. Ms. Hamilton, Keller extended his hand with practiced charm. A pleasure to finally meet the architect of Hamilton Building Supply's remarkable turnaround. I accepted his handshake firmly. Mr. Keller, I appreciate you making time for this meeting. Of course, he smiled thinly. Though I must say I was expecting a simple loan repayment plan rather than... He gestured at our assembled team, quite this level of production. We believe in being thorough, I replied, gesturing for everyone to be seated. Shall we begin? The next hour unfolded like a chess match, with each side carefully advancing its position. Keller opened by reiterating the terms of their loan call, full repayment of $4 million within the original 30-day window, now down to 26 days, or immediate transfer of controlling interest in Hamilton Building Supply to Meridian Capital. As you can see from the original agreement signed by Robert Hamilton, Keller's attorney noted, sliding copies of the document across the table. These terms were clearly established at the outset. Eleanor leaned forward. What's less clear is why Meridian has chosen this particular moment to call the note, when Hamilton Building Supply has never missed a payment in 15 years. Market conditions change, opportunities arise, Keller replied smoothly. Our investment committee regularly reviews our portfolio positions. This decision was purely business, nothing personal. Just as it was purely business with Westlake, manufacturing and Pine River contractors? I asked, pushing forward copies of legal filings from 2 other companies. Both family-owned businesses that received rescue financing from Meridian, both given impossible repayment terms, both now, subdivided and sold off to larger competitors. Keller's expression didn't change, but a slight tightening around his eyes suggested I'd struck a nerve. Those situations were entirely different. Were they? I countered. Or is this another example of Meridian's established pattern of predatory lending practices targeting family-owned businesses, practices that might interest the banking regulators currently reviewing your application for a banking license. From the corner of my eye, I could see my father's shock at my directness, my mother's disapproval, and, most surprisingly, a flicker of reluctant admiration on Vanessa's face. Keller's attorney leaned in to whisper something, but he waved her off. "I admire your research, Ms. Hamilton, but innuendo and threats won't change the facts. The loan is due. Either pay it or prepare for new ownership." Actually, I opened my presentation folder. We're prepared to do neither. Instead, we're proposing a structured buyout of Meridian's position. I slid the proposal across the table. $3 million paid immediately, with the remaining $1 million plus interest paid over 6 months. Keller barely glanced at the document. "The terms require payment in full. We're not interested in installments. You might be interested in avoiding a protracted legal battle that would become very public just as your banking application is being considered," Eleanor interjected smoothly. "Especially given the questions our filing would raise about Meridian's lending practices." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Keller's face. A lawsuit would only damage Hamilton's reputation as well. Construction is a relationship business. Contractors don't like working with litigious suppliers. "A calculated risk we're prepared to take," I responded. "But before we go down that road, I'd like you to consider our offer." While Keller and his team huddled to review our proposal, Vanessa leaned across the table toward me. "Where are you getting $3 million on immediate notice?" she whispered urgently. I met her gaze steadily. "By leveraging the business you thought you could just take over. The business I've spent 8 years building while you were posting Instagram pictures of Gregory's pretend real estate empire." Her face flushed, but surprisingly, she didn't argue. "Is it true? About Meridian owning most of the company all this time?" I nodded slightly. "Dad kept it secret from everyone. Even Mom didn't know until yesterday." Something shifted in Vanessa's expression, the first crack in her entitled facade I'd seen since childhood. Before she could respond, Keller's team broke their huddle. "Your proposal is inadequate," Keller announced. "However, we might consider a modified arrangement. Full payment of $3 million now, with the remaining amount due in 30 days, not 6 months. And we would require additional collateral to secure the outstanding balance." "What collateral did you have in mind?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Your personal real estate holdings," he replied with a thin smile. "I believe you own your home outright, valued at approximately $1.2 million. That should provide adequate security." My mother gasped audibly. "Olivia, you can't—" "I've already leveraged my home to secure part of the initial payment," I cut her off. "There's no additional collateral to offer." Keller's smile widened. "Then I'm afraid we don't have a deal." The room fell silent, tension thickening the air. In that moment, Gregory, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly cleared his throat. "What about the Bennett property on Lakeshore Drive?" he suggested, glancing at Vanessa. "That could serve as collateral." Vanessa paled. "Gregory, that's your father's vacation home. We can't— Actually, it's in your name," he corrected her, not meeting her eyes. "Dad transferred ownership last year for tax purposes, remember?" The pieces clicked into place. Gregory wasn't offering his father's property. He was volunteering, an asset Vanessa controlled without Harold Bennett's knowledge or approval. "The property is worth at least $2 million, Gregory continued, addressing Keller directly. "More than enough to secure the outstanding balance." Keller looked intrigued. "Do you have documentation of ownership?" Gregory pulled out his phone, tapping rapidly. "I can have the deed emailed over immediately." Vanessa grabbed his arm. "We need to discuss this first," she hissed. "There's nothing to discuss," he replied, his voice suddenly cold. "It's either this or watch your family lose everything. Besides, it's just temporary collateral. Once the balance is paid, the lien is removed. I watched the exchange with growing suspicion. Gregory's sudden cooperative spirit didn't align with everything I knew about him. There had to be an angle I wasn't seeing. Keller's team conferred briefly before he turned back to us. If the property checks out, we may have the basis for an agreement. However, I have one additional condition. His gaze fixed on me. Ms. Hamilton must personally guarantee the outstanding balance. That's standard in such arrangements, I acknowledged. But I have a condition of my own. Meridian must release all claims to ownership stakes in Hamilton Building Supply, converting the remaining balance to a standard commercial loan with market rate terms. Keller considered this for a moment. Acceptable, provided the initial $3 million is received by end of business tomorrow. We can wire the funds this afternoon, I countered. With that, the framework of an agreement was established. Keller's legal team began drafting the necessary documents while Eleanor reviewed each point carefully. Throughout the process, I noticed Vanessa and Gregory engaged in tense, whispered exchanges, their body language growing increasingly hostile. As the meeting concluded and Keller's team departed, my father approached me, his expression a mix of relief and remorse. I don't know how you pulled this off, but thank you. Don't thank me yet, I cautioned. We still have to transfer the funds and sign the final agreement, and then we need to have a serious discussion about company governance going forward. I gathered my materials, nodding to Jamie to begin implementation of our funding plan. This situation can never happen again. As everyone filed out, Vanessa lingered behind, allowing Gregory to storm ahead. When we were alone in the conference room, she finally spoke. You know he's lying, don't you? She said quietly. About the lakeshore property. I suspected as much, I admitted. What's the real story? Vanessa sank into a chair, suddenly looking, exhausted. The property isn't worth anywhere near $2 million. It's been remortgaged 3 times. Gregory's father is underwater on it, which is why he gifted it to me last year, to hide it from his creditors. She laughed bitterly. The great real estate mogul Harold Bennett is just as much a fraud as his son. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, genuinely curious. You were ready to take over my company yesterday. She was quiet for a moment, staring out at the city below. Because I finally see the whole picture. Dad lied to all of us. Gregory and his father lied to me. I've been a pawn in everyone's game. She turned to face me directly. Including yours, I suppose. You knew all along that Gregory's business was a house of cards, didn't you? I tried to tell you 2 years ago, I reminded her. You accused me of being jealous of your perfect life, so winced at the memory. Perfect illusion, you mean? She stood up, smoothing her skirt with trembling hands. So, what happens now? When Meridian discovers the property is worthless as collateral? It was the question I'd been asking myself since Gregory had made his unexpected offer. The most likely scenario was troubling, to say the least. That, I said carefully, depends on what you decide to do in the next 24 hours. Because this family has run out of secrets to keep and lies to tell. And when the truth finally comes out completely, we'll all have to live with the consequences. The audit report landed on my desk at 6:17 a.m., delivered by a courier who looked like he'd been awake even fewer hours than I had. After leaving Meridian's offices yesterday, I'd spent the night orchestrating the complex financial maneuvers needed to transfer $3 million to satisfy the first part of our agreement. The remaining $1 million and the fraudulent collateral situation still loomed over us like a gathering storm. I poured my 3rd cup of coffee and opened the sealed envelope, preparing myself for confirmation of what I already suspected. Systematic. Financial mismanagement by my parents, possibly aided by Vanessa and Gregory. What I found instead sent a cold shock through my system. Jamie, I called, not taking my eyes off the document. I need you in my office. Now. She appeared in the doorway seconds later, alert despite the early hour. What's wrong? I wordlessly handed her the audit report, open to page 37, a detailed analysis of transactions between Hamilton Building Supply and a series of shell companies with variations of the name Westlake Ventures. Over the past 4 years, these entities had received payments totaling nearly $2.8 million for consulting services and market analysis that appeared to have never been delivered. These companies, Jamie said slowly, they're not connected to your father or Vanessa, are they? No, I confirmed, my voice tight. According to the auditors, all of them trace back to Harold Bennett, Gregory's father. Jamie sank into the chair across from my desk. This doesn't make sense. Why would your parents be paying Gregory's father millions in fake consulting fees? I flipped to the next page, where the auditor had helpfully included a timeline of the payments alongside significant company events. Look at when the first payment was made, 2 weeks after I returned to save the business. And look at the payment schedule, quarterly installments that increased as our profitability improved. Understanding dawned on Jamie's face. It's like protection money. Exactly. But protection from what? I stood and paced the length of the office, mentally reconstructing the puzzle with this new piece. My father claimed Meridian was the only outside investor, that he'd exhausted all other options before signing that predatory agreement. Maybe he lied about that too, Jamie suggested. Maybe Bennett was involved somehow. The pieces were aligning, but not quite connecting. I reached for my phone. There's only one way to find out. I'm calling Eleanor. Our attorney answered on the first ring. I was just about to call you, she said instead of greeting. I've been reviewing the ownership records for that lakeshore property Gregory offered as collateral. It's complicated. I'm learning that everything in my family is complicated, I replied grimly. Tell me. The property was indeed transferred to Vanessa's name last year, but there's a prior lien against it, held by Meridian Capital Partners. The final piece clicked into place. Eleanor, I need you to check something else. In the original loan agreement between my father and Meridian, is there any mention of Harold Bennett? Perhaps as a guarantor or facilitator? I'll have to review it again. Why? Because I think we've been looking at this all wrong, I explained. The audit shows my parents have been making regular payments to Bennett's shell companies for years. What if he was the one who connected them with Meridian in the first place? A finder's fee arrangement gone bad? Eleanor mused. It's possible. Let me check and call you back. I ended the call and turned to Jamie. We need to secure the company's assets immediately. Change all banking passwords and authorization protocols. Freeze any expenditures over $1,000. And most importantly, delay the $3 million wire transfer to Meridian until I give the final approval. You think Bennett and Meridian are working together? Jamie asked, already typing furiously on her tablet to implement the security measures. I think nothing in this situation is what it appears to be, I replied. And I'm not transferring another dollar until I know exactly what we're dealing with. I spent the next hour reviewing the audit report in detail. The pattern was unmistakable. Each time Hamilton Building Supply secured a major contract or expanded into a new market, a payment to one of Bennett's entities followed. It wasn't just protection money. It was a systematic siphoning of our growth. My phone rang. Eleanor calling back. You were right, she said without preamble. Bennett's name doesn't appear on the main loan document, but there's a separate finder's fee agreement referenced in the appendix. I requested it from Meridian's counsel this morning, claiming we needed it for the loan restructuring. And it stipulates that Bennett receives 15% of any value extracted from Hamilton Building Supply, either through loan interest or portfolio acquisition. In other words, if Meridian takes over your company, Bennett gets a significant cut. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd imagined. So my father was played by both of them. Bennett pretended to be a friend offering a financial lifeline, then steered him into Meridian's trap, and has been collecting payments ever since. That appears to be the case, Eleanor confirmed. And now that Meridian is moving to acquire the company, Bennett stands to make millions, far more than those consulting fees. Unless Gregory actually knows about this arrangement, I thought aloud. What if offering Vanessa's property as collateral was never meant to help us? What if it was designed to fail? Creating a default that triggers immediate takeover, Eleanor. Finished my thought. It's devious but plausible. Have you spoken with your sister about this? Not yet, but I'm about to. I ended the call and texted Vanessa. We need to talk. Alone. My office. 30 minutes. While waiting for my sister, I called the one person who could no longer avoid giving me straight answers. My father answered on the fourth ring, his voice wary. The audit is complete, I said without greeting. It shows $2.8 million in payments to Harold Bennett's shell companies over the past 8 years. Want to explain? Silence stretched for several seconds before he sighed heavily. How much do you know? About how I met Bennett? Clearly not enough. It was 15 years ago, when the first big box home improvement chain opened across town. Our retail sales dropped 40% overnight. I was desperate, looking for investors everywhere. His voice had the hollow quality of a confession long delayed. Bennett approached me at a Chamber of Commerce event, said he specialized in helping family businesses navigate transitions. He seemed to understand our situation perfectly. Because he'd helped create it, I realized. Let me guess. He suggested expanded financing just as the bank was about to call our existing loans? He said he had connections at Meridian, that they worked with businesses like ours all the time. The loan terms seemed reasonable initially. It wasn't until after I signed that Bennett explained his consulting arrangement would need to continue indefinitely. Blackmail, I stated flatly. He never threatened explicitly, my father clarified. He just made it clear that Meridian valued his opinion on which borrowers deserved flexibility and which didn't. If his consulting relationship with us remained productive, he would ensure Meridian remained patient with any payment issues. And you never thought to tell me this? Even after I invested everything I had to save the business? I was ashamed, he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. And afraid. Bennett made it clear that if I told anyone, especially you, he would recommend Meridian call the loan immediately. He said your emotional attachment to the company would lead to rash decisions. A knock at my office door interrupted us. I have to go, I told him. But this conversation isn't over. Vanessa entered, looking nothing like the polished, confident woman who had strutted into my conference room 2 days earlier. Her designer outfit had been replaced by jeans and a simple blouse, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. You wanted to talk? She said, taking the seat across from me. I silently pushed the audit report toward her, open to the page detailing Bennett's shell companies. She skimmed it, confusion evident on her face, then shock as understanding dawned. Gregory's father has been taking money from the company all this time? She looked up at me. Did Dad know? Yes. It was essentially blackmail to keep Meridian from calling their loan. I watched her process this information. But there's more. Bennett has a separate agreement with Meridian. If they acquire Hamilton Building Supply, he gets 15% of the value. Vanessa's face drained of color. So when Gregory offered my property as collateral, he was likely setting up a deliberate default, I confirmed. The property has a prior lien from Meridian. It's worthless as collateral, which Gregory and his father certainly knew. They used me, she whispered, more to herself than to me. All these years, for the first time since we were children, I felt a flicker of genuine sympathy for my sister. Did you know about any of this? The shell companies, the finder's fee arrangement, any of it? She shook her head vehemently. I knew Gregory's business. Wasn't doing as well as he claimed, but he always said his father was backing him, that there was family money to fall back on. She gave a bitter laugh. Turns out the family money was ours, just laundered through fake consulting contracts. There's one thing I still don't understand, I said. Why push so hard for you to take over as CEO now? Why not just let the loan default naturally? Vanessa was quiet for a moment, seeming to debate how much to share. Tax implications, she finally said. At least that's what Gregory explained. Something about how Meridian's acquisition would be treated more favorably if there was a legitimate business restructuring beforehand. She rubbed her temples. Honestly, I stopped following the details. I just knew that if I became CEO, our financial problems would be solved. While conveniently giving Bennett and Meridian someone else to blame for the company's sudden collapse, I added, with you as the figurehead CEO, they could claim the change in leadership caused the default, not their years of financial manipulation. The key weight of this realization settled on Vanessa's shoulders visibly. What are you going to do? The $3 million is due to Meridian today, with the remaining $1 million in 30 days. Actually, I leaned forward. I haven't transferred the $3 million yet, and I'm not going to, at least not to Meridian. Her eyes widened. But the agreement was based on fraudulent representations. I cut her off. They failed to disclose their arrangement with Bennett. More importantly, they accepted collateral they knew was already encumbered by their own lien. That's not just unethical, it's potentially illegal. So what's the plan? We can't fight Meridian directly. They have too many resources, too many connections. You're right, I agreed. We can't fight them directly, but we don't have to. I pulled out another folder, this one containing documentation I'd prepared through the night. We just need to make ourselves a less appealing target. While simultaneously making their predatory behavior more visible, I outlined the strategy Jamie and I had developed, a three-pronged approach that would neutralize both Meridian and Bennett while preserving Hamilton Building Supply's independence. As I explained each component, I watched my sister's expression shift from skepticism to grudging respect. It could work, she acknowledged when I finished, but it requires absolute unity from the Hamilton family. No more secrets, no more side deals. She hesitated. I'm not sure Dad is capable of that. He doesn't have to be, I replied. Because effective immediately, he'll have no operational role in the company. Neither will Mom, the board of directors. We're establishing will oversee all major decisions, with me as CEO and chairperson. And me? Vanessa asked quietly. Where do I fit in this new structure? It was the question I'd been wrestling with since discovering the full extent of the deception surrounding us. Vanessa had been both perpetrator and victim, complicit in trying to take over a company she hadn't helped build, yet also manipulated by her husband and father-in-law for years. That depends, I said carefully, on whether you're prepared to do something you've never done before. Which is? Earn your place. I held her gaze steadily. Not through family connection or entitlement, but through actual contribution and commitment. Vanessa was silent for a long moment, considering. And if I am? If I want to earn my place? Then you start at the beginning, learning the business from the ground up, just like I did. No shortcuts, no special treatment. I slid a document across the desk to her. This is an offer letter for an entry-level position in our project management department. Standard salary, standard benefits, standard performance expectations. She picked up the letter, skimming its contents. Project coordinator? That's barely above administrative assistant. It's where everyone starts, I countered. The difference is you'll have something most new employees don't. A clear path to advancement if you prove your capability. In 3 years, you could be heading the department if you demonstrate the right skills and commitment. 3 years, she repeated, clearly struggling with the concept. Working regular hours, following someone else's direction. Welcome to how the rest of the world lives, I said, not unkindly. Including me, for the past 8 years. Our conversation was interrupted by Jamie bursting through the door, tablet in hand. Olivia, you need to see this. Meridian's counsel just called. They've discovered irregularities with the lakeshore property and are demanding immediate full payment or transfer of ownership control. Right on schedule, I noted calmly. Tell them we've also discovered irregularities, specifically their undisclosed financial arrangement with Harold Bennett, and we'll be addressing all issues at this afternoon's meeting. There's more, Jamie continued. Gregory is in the lobby, demanding to see Vanessa. He's making quite a scene. Vanessa's face hardened. I'll handle Gregory. Are you sure? I asked, genuinely concerned. Given everything you've just learned, I'm sure, she replied, standing with new resolve. It's time I started cleaning up my own messes instead of expecting others to do it for me. As she headed for the door, she paused, the job offer letter still in her hand. About this position, when would I start? Monday, I answered, assuming we still have a company by then. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. We will. I'm starting to understand that when Olivia Hamilton sets her mind to something, it happens, whether the rest of us are ready or not. After she left, Jamie looked at me quizzically. You're really going to hire her after everything that's happened? I'm going to give her the opportunity to prove herself, I corrected. Just like I had to do 8 years ago. I reached for my phone, preparing to set our counter strategy in motion. Now let's make sure we still have a company for her to work for. The pieces were in place, the players all in position. This afternoon's meeting with Meridian would determine not just the fate of Hamilton Building Supply, but the future of our family. As I dialed the first number on my list, a financial journalist known for exposing corporate malfeasance, I felt a strange sense of calm descend. Hello, Ms. Rivera? This is Olivia Hamilton. I have a story you might be interested in about predatory lending practices targeting family businesses. 3 news vans were parked outside Meridian Capital's gleaming headquarters when I arrived for our 2 p.m. meeting. Victor Keller's assistant met me in the lobby, her normally composed demeanor noticeably flustered. Mr. Keller suggests postponing. Until next week, she informed me, smartphone clutched tightly in her manicured hand. He's dealing with an unexpected media situation. I'm aware of the situation, I replied calmly. And it's precisely why our meeting can't wait. Please inform Mr. Keller that I'm here with my full team as scheduled, including our counsel and financial advisors. As she reluctantly escorted us to the elevator, Jamie leaned close. Channel 7 just went live with the story. The business reporter is connecting Meridian to 3 other family businesses that experienced similar rescue then seize situations. And the Federal Reserve Board? I asked quietly. Their spokesperson issued a statement 15 minutes ago, confirming they're reviewing all relevant information regarding Meridian's banking license application. Perfect timing. The first phase of our counter-strategy was unfolding exactly as planned. By the time we reached the 47th floor, my phone had buzzed with confirmation that Phase 2 was also in motion. A text from Eleanor that simply read, SEC contact made. Documents received. The conference room atmosphere couldn't have been more different from yesterday's meeting. Gone was Keller's confident command. Instead, he sat with his legal team in what appeared to be an emergency strategy session, documents, spread across the table. He glanced up as we entered, his practiced charm replaced by barely concealed agitation. Ms. Hamilton, he greeted tersely. I believe we have some misunderstandings to address. I believe we have some fraudulent business practices to address, I corrected, taking the same seat I'd occupied yesterday. But let's start with the lakeshore property that was offered as collateral, property your company already held a lien against, a fact you conveniently failed to disclose. Keller's attorney interjected smoothly. Any issues with the collateral simply accelerate the default provisions of our agreement. Hamilton Building Supply must deliver full payment immediately or surrender controlling interest. Actually, Eleanor countered, opening her briefcase, Acceptance of collateral you knew to be encumbered constitutes bad faith negotiation at minimum, potentially rising to the level of fraud. Combined with your undisclosed financial arrangement with Harold Bennett, you've invalidated the entire agreement. Keller's eyes narrowed at the mention of Bennett. I don't know what you're talking about. I slid a copy of the finder's fee agreement across the table. 15% of any value extracted from Hamilton Building Supply, plus nearly $3 million in consulting fees paid through shell companies over 8 years. Mr. Bennett has been quite profitable at our expense. Ancient history, Keller dismissed, though his eyes darted to his legal team. Whatever arrangement existed with Bennett has no bearing on your current obligation. The Securities and Exchange Commission disagrees, Eleanor noted. They're particularly interested in how these arrangements were disclosed, or rather, not disclosed, to your investors and in your banking license application. For the first time, genuine alarm flashed across Keller's face. You've contacted the SEC? Along with the financial crime units of the State Attorney General's office and the FBI, I confirmed. But we're not here to threaten you, Mr. Keller. We're here to offer a solution that works for everyone. I opened my presentation folder and removed a single document. This is our proposal. Meridian will release all claims against Hamilton Building. Supply in exchange for a one-time payment of $2 million, half the amount currently due. You'll also sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding all aspects of this situation. Keller nearly laughed. Why would we accept half of what we're owed when we could take the entire company? Because by this time tomorrow, your banking license application will be effectively dead if you don't, I replied evenly. The federal regulators I spoke with this morning were particularly troubled by the pattern they're seeing across multiple Meridian investments. Allegations without proof, his attorney scoffed, though with noticeably less confidence than yesterday. I gestured to Jamie, who opened her tablet and turned it toward them. On the screen was a private banking portal showing a wire transfer in progress. This is $2 million being transferred to an escrow account controlled by a federal magistrate judge. If we reach agreement today, those funds go to Meridian. If not, they're held as evidence in the fraud investigation that's already underway. The atmosphere in the room shifted perceptibly as Keller and his team absorbed the implications. They weren't just facing a desperate family business anymore. They were facing a carefully orchestrated legal and public relations counterattack. You've been busy, Keller observed, his tone somewhere between irritation and reluctant respect. I've had 8 years of practice saving this company from people who underestimated me, I replied. Now shall we proceed with the agreement? Or would you prefer to explain to your investors why your banking license was denied due to fraud investigations? The next 2 hours unfolded in a tense negotiation over the precise terms of our settlement. By 4:30 p.m., we had a signed agreement. Meridian would release all claims against Hamilton Building Supply in exchange for $2 million, while both parties would maintain confidentiality about the specific terms. As we gathered our materials to leave, Keller approached me while our respective legal teams finalized the paperwork. I underestimated you, Ms. Hamilton. A mistake I won't make with future investments. That assumes you'll have future investments to make, I noted. Your arrangement with Bennett still poses significant regulatory issues. A calculating look crossed his face. Perhaps we could reach an additional understanding. Information about Bennett's other business arrangements could be valuable to the right parties. I instantly recognized the offer. Keller would throw Bennett under the bus to save himself. Are you suggesting you have evidence of broader fraudulent activity by Mr. Bennett? Let's just say he's applied his consulting model to several family businesses over the years. Keller glanced at his legal team, then lowered his voice. Information that might help certain companies recover misappropriated funds, for instance. I'll have my attorney contact yours, I replied neutrally, already thinking of the implications. If Bennett had defrauded multiple businesses the way he had ours, the potential for a coordinated legal response was significant. As we rode the elevator down to the lobby, Eleanor could barely contain her satisfaction. He folded completely. And that offer to provide evidence against Bennett, that's pure self-preservation. It's also leverage we can use to recover the rest of the money Bennett stole from us, I noted. Speaking of which, what's the status on freezing the Bennett assets? Jamie checked her phone. Judge signed the temporary order 20 minutes ago. Gregory's father can't transfer or access any business assets pending the fraud investigation. The first phase of justice had been secured, but I knew the more difficult confrontations still lay ahead. What about Vanessa and Gregory? Any update? Security. Reported that Gregory left the building shortly after Vanessa spoke with him, Jamie replied. Apparently it wasn't an amicable conversation. She's been in your father's office for the past hour. I nodded, mentally preparing for what would likely be an emotional family reckoning. And the board of directors proposal? First Republic Bank has approved the governance changes as a condition of our new financing arrangement, Eleanor confirmed. Your parents will need to sign the updated articles of incorporation today for the funds to be released tomorrow. Everything was proceeding according to plan, yet I felt no triumph, only a weary determination to see this through to its conclusion. The company had been saved from external predators, but healing the family wounds would prove far more challenging. Parents and Vanessa were waiting in the main conference room when we returned to Hamilton headquarters. The tension was palpable, with my father and sister on opposite sides of the table, my mother seated uncomfortably between them. It's done, I announced as I entered. Meridian has released all claims against the company in exchange for $2 million. We've maintained controlling interest and eliminated the debt. Instead of the relief I expected, my father's expression remained troubled. And Bennett? His assets have been frozen pending investigation. The consulting payments will stop immediately, and we'll be pursuing full recovery of the fraudulently obtained funds. I set my briefcase on the table. I've also negotiated for evidence of Bennett's arrangements with other companies, which strengthens our legal position considerably. Vanessa looked up, her eyes red-rimmed but clear. Gregory's gone. He cleared out our bank accounts and took off after I confronted him. Said his father would handle me if I made trouble. He'll find that more difficult with his assets frozen, and the FBI examining his business practices, I assured her. Did you sign the divorce papers Eleanor prepared? She nodded. Filed electronically an hour ago with an emergency motion to prevent dissipation of marital assets. Not that there's much left to protect. A bitter smile crossed her face. Turns out our lavish lifestyle was built entirely on credit and my family's money. The house has 3 mortgages, the cars are leased under his father's company, and my investment portfolio doesn't actually exist. My mother reached across the table to squeeze Vanessa's hand, the first genuine maternal gesture I'd seen her offer either of us in years. You can stay with us until you're settled. Actually, Vanessa straightened her shoulders. I've already found an apartment near the office. It's small, but I can afford it on a project coordinator's salary. She glanced at me, assuming that offer still stands. It does, I confirmed. Starting Monday, 8 a.m. sharp. My father cleared his throat, drawing our attention. I owe all of you an apology, especially you, Olivia. I let pride and fear cloud my judgment for years. Instead of acknowledging what you built, I resented how completely you'd transformed my simple hardware store into something I barely recognized. Dad, I began, but he held up his hand. Please, let me finish. When Bennett first approached me, I was desperate to save the business my father had started, to preserve it exactly as it had always been. I couldn't see that the world had changed, that we needed to evolve. He gestured at the modern offices surrounding us. You understood that instinctively. You built something far greater than I ever could have, and I was too stubborn to admit. His candor was unexpected. My father had never been one for emotional admissions or apologies. Perhaps the events of the past days had broken through decades of rigid pride. The new corporate structure requires your signatures, I said, handing them the governance documents Eleanor had prepared. It establishes a formal board of directors with 3 independent members, plus me as chairperson and CEO. You and Mom will retain non-voting emeritus positions, but operational control remains with professional management. My father took the YI document, skimming its contents before signing without hesitation. It's your company now, Olivia. It has been for years. I'm just sorry it took a crisis for me to accept that reality. As my mother added her signature, I felt a weight lifting. Not just the immediate threat to the company, but the burden of seeking approval and recognition I'd carried since childhood. There's one more thing, I said, pulling out a final document. This establishes an employment trust for all Hamilton building supply staff with 5 or more years of service. 10% of annual profits will be distributed among qualifying employees, with an additional 5% allocated to a retirement security fund. Taking care of the people who helped build this place, Vanessa observed. Something we should have done years ago. Something Olivia has been proposing for 3 years, my father acknowledged ruefully. Another innovation I resisted out of pure stubbornness. With the agreement signed and the immediate crises resolved, a strange quiet fell over the room. For 8 years I'd been fighting, first to save the company from bankruptcy, then to modernize against my father's resistance, and finally to protect it from Bennett and Meridian's predatory scheme. Now, for the first time, the path forward lay clear and unobstructed. What happens now? My mother asked, breaking the silence. Now, I said, gathering the signed documents, we rebuild. Not just the company, but our family. As my parents prepared to leave, Vanessa lingered behind. When we were alone, she approached me hesitantly. I've been thinking about what you said, about earning my place. I want you to know I'm serious, about starting from the beginning, learning this business properly. It won't be easy, I cautioned, especially with everything else you're dealing with. I know, but I'm tired of shortcuts and facades. She straightened her shoulders. Gregory and his father taught me a painful lesson about appearance versus reality. I'd rather build something solid, even if it takes years. I studied my sister, seeing genuine determination in her eyes for perhaps the first time. Monday morning, then, business casual dress, and be prepared to work directly with the contractors. They don't care about our family name, only whether you can do the job. I'll be ready, she promised, then hesitated before adding, thank you, not just for the job, but for stopping me from making the biggest mistake of my life. If I'd actually become CEO with Gregory and his father pulling the strings. You would have been their scapegoat when it all collapsed, I finished for her. But that's not going to happen now. After she left, I wandered through the quiet office, past the workstations of the employees whose livelihoods I'd fought to protect. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the sun setting over the industrial district where Hamilton Building Supply had begun 3 decades ago as my grandfather's modest hardware store. My phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. Reporter, from Business Weekly wants an exclusive on how a young female CEO outmaneuvered corporate raiders. Interview request for next week. I smiled to myself, thinking of how much had changed in just a few days. The company was secure, the family secrets exposed and beginning to heal, and the future, for the first time in years, held promise instead of hidden threats. Schedule it, I texted back. But make sure they understand this isn't just my story. It's about family business resilience and the importance of transparency. 8 years ago, I'd abandoned a promising architecture career to save my family's legacy. I'd built it from struggling local supplier to $10 million construction empire against relentless resistance. I'd weathered betrayal from those who should have supported me most and outmaneuvered predators who'd spent decades perfecting their tactics. But the true measure of what I'd built wasn't just in revenue figures or profit margins. It was in creating something strong enough to withstand both external attacks and internal divisions. A company with a foundation solid enough to support not just my future, but the futures of everyone who depended on it, including, perhaps surprisingly, my sisters. As I gathered my belongings to leave, I paused at the family photo still hanging in the hallway. My grandfather standing proudly before his original hardware store, my father as a young man at his side. Soon, a new photo would join it. The modern Hamilton building supply team, with two sisters standing together at its helm. Not because of birthright or entitlement, but because both, in their own ways, had earned their places. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.